Hi Nick, this is David. I hope it's okay if I respond via video. It's faster and easier for me, and this way I can give really sort of fleshed out answers. And this is the first time I'm really looking at these questions, so they're my honest and earnest reactions. Your first question is, with a bunch of new tech media outlets out there, Yahoo Tech, Recode, Tech Times, etc., uh, don't you think the market is overly saturated? How can that affect sustainability of new and existing tech journalism outlets? Well, one thing that is interesting, I mean, uh, it might not be oversaturated, right? Because that's why there are so many. I think there is a more so than other industries, there's an interest. An everyday person has interest in technology, as opposed to, I don't know, yeah, name your industry, right? I mean, sports. You put technology on the same level as sports, as opposed to on the same level as, like, pork belly stocks or something like that. So it might not be oversaturated. I do think that um, the most successful tech sites are not going to be generalists, right? There's only so many general tech sites that you really have or need or can win, right? But I do think that there can be more specialists, um, even if they're small. Like, for example, there's a guy who runs a site called Search Engine Land, which is fantastic. Um, and all he does really is cover search, and that aspect of technology, right? So you can definitely get really niche, um, like in that respect. So I wouldn't say it's and in that respect, your question about sustainability, it's a small operation, Search Engine Land, right? Compared to the generalist sites, it's going to be smaller. Number two, is that obsession with offline conferences justified for tech media? So I think you're talking about the conferences that some of the more generalist-esque um, tech sites like to have. They make money. I know that, right? I mean, but this is an interesting thing, right? So the conferences are for usually the tech industry itself, right? So they're sort of hosting a tech industry conference and charging and making money and sort of doing the thing, and then the next day they turn around and cover the tech industry. All right, I'm trying to think of an equivalent. Like, it would be as if the politics editors of the New York Times or the Washington Post had a conference for politicians, and they organized the conference and they decided who was keynote speaking, and you know went and got sponsorship dollars from other political PACs or something like that, right? It's very different. For some reason, we accept that for technology journalism organizations, tech sites, to organize tech conferences for the tech industry. Is it justified? They're certainly making money off of that, so it is financially justified. And I'm not trying to imply that it's not justified or that anything bad is necessarily happening as a result of it, but I do think it's kind of an interesting, nuanced relationship. Even if it's just I think the biggest conferences, tech conferences, are like sort of pitching conferences, right? We get 10 people, we bring in some VCs, and then we let them pitch. But again, that's the work of the tech industry being organized by a tech journalism site, right? They're basically setting up the infrastructure by which they can, the angels and the VCs can make their investments, and the early startups can get their opportunity, right? That's what they should be doing. And again, tech conferences are great for that, so it's good for them, and again, it's good for the site that organizes those. Number three, do you agree that everything is tech now, and literally every media outlet should have a tech reporter? I wouldn't say that everything is tech now. I would say that, like, and I say this about media companies, every technology company is a media company, and therefore every media company should be invested in or understand technology. I think that's really important. Um, so should every media outlet have a tech reporter? To some degree, yeah. I mean, even if you're the Chronicle of Higher Education, right? Technology is impacting education, right? I mean, we're literally, if you think about it from a broad perspective, we've gone from the industrial era to the information era, right? That's not a small shift, right? That is a huge thing, and so every institution that was organized and structured during the industrial era has to be reorganized and restructured during the information era. We see that really prominently with things like libraries or newspapers, um, things that dealt with the flow of information, right, but were organized in the industrial era, being rapidly disrupted during the information era. And that applies to education as well, right? I mean, how MOOCs alone, right? So I think every aspect of if you're sort of a tech utopian or dystopian person, you think that technology now is impacting every single aspect of human culture and civilization. And so, in that respect, no matter what you're covering, a tech reporter or somebody who's focusing on how the technology is changing that is important. Would you say that tech journalism continues to specialize, and soon only the biggest media companies out there would be able to afford and provide broad tech coverage? So this is kind of related to the first thing I was talking about. General tech coverage or broad tech coverage at a certain point has diminishing returns, right? I'm trying to think of like a really big tech story that is kind of a commodity tech story. Apple releases a new computer or something. Everybody is fighting for that. It's not like a scoop, right? Because Apple determines very much, when that information goes out. They're really good at that. And so, uh, there's only so many diminishing returns. There's only so much added value that any general organization can really provide on top of that news. And so I do think that there's, at a certain point, only a certain number of those broad tech coverage really needs to be provided, or it's the broad media entities, New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, or the Atlantic or whatever that can still sort of provide a general tech coverage supported by their other stuff that I think adds value. Because I don't know if their tech coverage necessarily adds value. I think they're fighting that same fight most of the time in terms of just doing commodity tech news. Do you foresee the split in tech journalism serving the business industry and the general public, personal tech-focused outlets, to deepen? What about tech news orgs that are looking at broader cultural scientific issues, The Verge or Global News, Mashable? Is it a trend, or are these folks just outliers? This is an interesting question. I'm not 100% sure if I understand it. Do I foresee the split in tech journalism serving the business industry and the general public? So I do think that there's this really depends on how the news organization defines themselves as a brand, right? And maybe you talk about that a little bit, right? Or are they broader cultural scientific issues like The Verge or Global News, Mashable? Mashable is an interesting one where they really were very tech focused, and now they're sort of really going broad, still with sort of a tech angle, but going broader. Um, it's hard for me to. I do think that some tech news sites, like I think it's called The Information, which is you have to subscribe to it. I think it's like $400 a year or something. Is very much serving the business and industry. They're like trying to be the Wall Street Journal, right? It's for the people in the know, the business leaders of the tech industry. Whereas like Engadget is the opposite, right? The Engadget is for consumers. So I think that's just about knowing your audience. And you can't serve both, right? You could try, but I think it'd be really ugly, right? The information is not there for consumers, the news organization, just as Engadget is not really there to serve these sort of insider business, trading of rumors or whatever. Um, uh, Instead, it's serving the consumers. 6, this looks like your last question. Who, in your opinion, is quote-unquote winning in tech coverage? Is it bigger outlets, technology desks, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Business Insider, Silicon Insider, or highly specialized tech shops, The Verge, Engadget, TechCrunch? Why? Can we even compare these two groups? To some degree, I think we can compare the two groups, although really there's some aspects of this that are not fair. You mentioned Recode, RE/code, which used to be All Things D. I mean, it's the same team basically from All Things D. I think they're doing fantastic, and it's still, I mean, it's early days for them. They've only launched a couple months ago maybe, but they've proven themselves obviously with All Things D time and time again, and they're doing it again with Recode. I think as far as a independent technology site, like you compare them or TechCrunch or Pando Daily or ReadWriteWeb or there's many. I really like Recode out of all of those. as far as I think sort of getting the sort of inside information, but still aiming it, I think, to a general, not a general audience, but but not necessarily completely tech insider. People that want to follow what's going on in the industry, but aren't necessarily part of, or at least the heavy hitters, Wall Street Journal style within the industry. Anyway, so you asked me for who I think is a, I wouldn't use the word winner, but I think they're doing a great job. Recode is doing a fantastic job.